Hey guys, welcome back to another tier list. So today, as you can see, we'll be ranking all of Francis Ford Coppola's films. This guy's one of my favorite directors. He's up there with those legendary guys who came out of the 60s and 70s like Spielberg, De Palma and Scorsese. I've already ranked all of their films, so I thought I'd do Coppola's now, as I've finished seeing all of his films recently as well. And yeah, he's got a lot of great ones, a lot of mediocre kind of middle ground ones as well. And there's a few hot takes in here that are probably going to annoy a few people, but these are my opinions, and so we'll get straight into it. So first up, we have The Godfather Part 2. This is actually my favourite of the trilogy. Most people seem to lean towards the first one, however, I do like the second one more. It's obviously an S-tier film, it's a classic, it's super long, it's like 200 minutes, and I haven't seen it in a long time, but what I really liked about it was the two parallel storylines running together. Like you've got Al Pacino's storyline as Michael Corleone, as well as the flashback storyline to Robert De Niro playing the father that Marlon Brando played in the original film. And I really liked those scenes, how they interwove throughout the film. And they just looked super realistic of the time period and everything. And it's a film I really have to go back and see again. But it is a classic. It's definitely an S-tier film. Next up on the list is another S-tier film, Apocalypse Now. This is one of the great war films of all time, probably possibly the best Vietnam War film. It's another S-tier, obviously. It's just a super in-depth, involving kind of film. You've got a great kind of mesmerizing performance from Marlon Brando in the later half of the movie. It just has some incredible scenery, some great war sequences. You know, the Flight of the Valkyrie scene where the helicopters are coming in. That's pretty epic. And yeah, just a lot of classic lines. You know, I love the smell of napalm in the morning and all that. It's a very, very good film. Easily an S-tier film. In the 70s was kind of where Coppola was at the top of his game as far as how well his movies did. After that, he really struggled throughout the rest of his career, but, making the Godfather films, Apocalypse Now, The Conversation and all that, they were really his kind of high points as far as how, well those films were received. So coming down to another one from the 70s, The Conversation. This is one that I saw once a few years ago, and a lot of people love this movie. They think it's one of his best films, and in my opinion, I just thought it was okay. There was nothing that stood out to me as being super entertaining or anything like that. I mean, I thought it was a good movie, but I was expecting more, I think, from it. So I'll put it in the B tier for now. I know a lot of people would put it up higher. Maybe I just need to rewatch it, but I do remember thinking it was good, but not great. It's one I might have to revisit, I think. Next up, we have The Rainmaker, and this is one of his better later films. It's a courtroom drama with Matt Damon in an early role of his and Danny DeVito. I actually like the film quite a bit. It's one of the John Grisham adaptations of his courtroom dramas. There were many of them came out in the 90s, and I think it's my favorite of that era of his courtroom dramas. And it's another, I'd say this is a solid B tier film for me. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's pretty good. Next we have Tucker, The Man in His Dream, starring Jeff Bridges. This is another solid B tier film from the 80s. There's a lot of, I think most of this video is going to be B tier films, I think, because Francis Ford Coppola has made a lot of films that I think are really good and solid, but not great. A handful that are great, and a few that are just terrible as well. So, but this is another solid B film. I do like the production value and the era that the film set in. I thought Jeff Bridges was good. Martin Landau was really good in the film. I have it on Blu-ray, so it is one I have to go back and watch again, but haven't seen for a few years again, but it was good and definitely worthy of a solid B. Peggy Sue Got Married is another 80s film that he did. It's one that I never got into too much. I'm going to put it in the C tier. Again, it's one I haven't seen for a long time, so I may need to rewatch that one. But I do like Kathleen Turner. I think she was really good in the 80s with Romancing the Stone and all that. And I think it has Jim Carrey in one of his early roles as well, so that's interesting. And Nicolas Cage, who is actually Francis Ford Coppola's nephew, I believe. So that's pretty cool. And he was in a few of his early films. But the movie overall, I don't remember a whole lot about it. I just remember thinking it was kind of average, kind of okay. So I think the C tier fits it for now. Rumblefish is one of his 80s classics. Again, this is a B tier, solid B tier film for me. I think it was good. I liked the stylistic choice of having it in black and white with occasional pops of colour, like the goldfish scene. I thought Mickey Rourke was quite good in the film. But overall, I was more of a fan of The Outsiders, which he did the same year, which was a kind of similar story, similar, like some of the same actors and cast and all that. But it was probably more of a commercial film that was more appealing to general audiences rather than Rumblefish. And so I don't think that's the reason why I like it more, but I just think it's a better film in my opinion. So The Outsiders, because we're talking about it, is another B tier film, but it's probably up the top of the B tier for me. And it's also got Tom Cruise in one of his first film roles. It's got a great cast of really famous, well, people that would go on to be really famous kind of actors throughout the 80s and 90s, and even today. So The Outsiders is another solid B tier film. And yeah, don't get me wrong, all the films in the B tier I think are good movies. So just because I haven't, popped them all up in the A or S tier doesn't mean I think they're trash or anything. I think B tier films are solid, good films. So they're all good in that tier as far as I'm concerned. Next up, we have one of his earlier films from the 60s, The Rain People. This one didn't do much for me, to be honest. I think it was just okay. Had a good performance in it from Jimmy Can, I think his name is. So he was quite good, but the movie overall I just thought was lacking interest and entertainment value, so I'll put that in the C. One from the Heart is an interesting film. It's a big flop that he made in the 80s. It was a musical. I think they spent a lot of money on it, so he went bankrupt after making the film. The movie itself is quite interesting. I actually like the film. I think the thing I like most about the movie is the way it's set in Las Vegas, but it's all shot on sound stages, so everything's fake. So you've got the strip and you've got the street and all the houses and everything in the desert, but it's all on sound stages, so it has this fake kind of look to it, but it looks really cool at the same time. And I think that's probably my favourite part about the movie is just the visual aspect of it, because none of the songs really stuck with me, and the two lead characters don't really seem to have much chemistry. I'm going to put it in the B tier still, because I do think it's quite a good film. It's an oddity though, because it's, as I said, like, the two leads don't really work that well together. They're good actors, but they don't have chemistry. The song choices are okay, but it's definitely an interesting film visually. So I think just for the visuals in the film alone, I'm going to put it in the B tier, because, I think it gets a bad rap for being a bad film in general, whereas it's got a lot to offer as well, I think. So that would be cool if that came out on Blu-ray one day too, because I'd like to get it again, and just for looking at it, like, it looks really cool. Next up we have Gardens of Stone. This was quite a boring, dull kind of film in my opinion. I didn't really like it at all. So James Caan's back in this movie. It's another war film about Vietnam, except it kind of takes place in America, and you don't really see any of the war or anything like that. It's just, I can't remember a whole lot about it, to be honest, but I remember it just being boring and not really enjoying it. So I'm going to put that in the D tier, because there was nothing really that stood out to me as being able to put it any higher than that, unfortunately. Next up we have The Godfather Part 3. So we're doing all of these out of order, but Part 3 was good. I'd probably say it's the top of the B tier. It's not quite an A tier film for me. I do like the whole trilogy overall, but it is the weakest. However, I do think it's the most emotionally impactful with the ending that it has. I think the way the movie ends is really interesting and quite emotional, and I think it ends it on a high note. Like, it really ends strong for the whole trilogy and the film. With the way things wrap up. If you've seen the film, then the scene on the stairs and all that at the opera and everything. It's pretty impactful and a solid film overall as well. So definitely at the top of the B tier. Next we have Tetro, which is one of his more recent works. He did a few independent kind of low-budget films over the last 20 years, but none of them really stood out that much to me, and Tetro was quite weak in my opinion. I'm going to put it in the C tier. We'll put it at the top of the C tier, because it was just okay. I was expecting a bit more from it. It's another one that he's done in black and white. But I can't tell you too much about it, because I don't really remember, because it didn't really stick in my head as being that good of a film. Finian's Rainbow is next. So this is the only film I hadn't seen of his up until like a week ago. I kind of put it off because I wasn't really interested in watching a 60s musical that's like 2.5 hours long and it had bad reviews and stuff. Like the IMDb, it was on a 6.1. But I watched it like, yeah, say a week ago, just so I could do this list. And I was actually quite pleasantly surprised by it, to be honest. I think it's actually his best early work before The Godfather. It's still not great. I'm going to put it in the B tier, but I'm going to put it up higher in the B tier because I did like it quite a bit. And it's just got that big, 60s kind of musical feel where it's kind of a big cast. There's a lot going on. The songs in this film work better for me than they did in One from the Heart. I also really liked the setting. I liked the dancing. Fred Astaire was cool. I actually liked a lot of the characters that I thought would annoy me. And it just kind of, we live in an era where you're watching dark films that all the time that are coming out, and they focus on heavy, impactful kind of world-changing scenarios and situations. And it's just nice to kind of sit back and watch something that's not, the end of the world at stake or anything like that, and it's happy and it's joyful. Like, I don't think there's too many movies that you watch that are just joyful, and I think that Finian's Rainbow is just a joyful kind of fun movie, and I really enjoyed it for that. It was kind of refreshing because I watch a lot of horrors and thrillers and dramas and dark, heavy kind of films, so it was good to kind of get a break from that and see something nice and different. It's even a film I'd buy on Blu-ray, so I do recommend the movie if you haven't seen it. And if you've been putting it off because of, its IMDb score or something like that, or its length, it's actually really good, and I enjoy it quite a bit. And so I'm going to promote it a bit because it definitely needs to be seen more, I think. Especially as one like his third film. I think it was his third film. He did a really great job of it. So moving on, we have another one of his more recent films, Youth Without Youth. This was just confusing. I didn't really understand it a lot. Yeah, it had some cool ideas and concepts and things like that, but overall, I just think it's a C tier film. I thought it was okay. It was definitely unique and had an original idea going for it with Tim Roth in the lead, but it didn't do much for me personally. Next up, we have Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, if you know me, anything about me, you know that I love kind of gothic horror and I love vampire films. And for me personally, Bram Stoker's Dracula is my favorite vampire movie. And it's my favorite Francis Ford Coppola film. So this is going to annoy a lot of people because I'm putting it above Apocalypse Now and the Godfather films. But man, I just love this movie. It's a film I watch at least once a year. I love the visuals in the movie. I love the soundtrack. I love the cast. Besides Keanu Reeves, who's a bit dodgy. He's a good actor, but here he just doesn't really suit the part. But Gary Oldman was great. Anthony Hopkins was a lot of fun. And Winona Ryder was pretty good too. But I love the visuals of the film and just how they kind of stuck to practical effects from the time period, like back, 50, 60, 70 years ago before they had computer visual effects and things like that, and made a film that just was all real and on camera. And the movie's so entertaining. It's so much fun. It's a gothic horror film that's just, great to watch around this time of year with Halloween coming up. And super entertaining, super dark, but it just has dripping with like this visual flair that's amazing and really awesome. And as I said, the soundtrack is great too. Can't remember the composer's name, but he did a really fantastic job just kind of building this kind of just sound for the movie that works so well as well. And I could just keep praising this film because, as I said, it's my favorite of his and it's my favorite vampire movie. And so super underrated as well. I know people like the film, but I love the film and I'd highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. So going from his best film, in my opinion, to his worst film, I'd say, You're a Big Boy Now. So this is a 60s kind of edgy comedy. I don't remember a lot about it. I just remember not liking it at all. It's at the bottom of the D tier for me. It was only his second film, but it didn't do anything for me at all. It was a comedy, but it just fell flat completely, and did not like it. Next, we have his first film from way back in 1963, and that's the horror film Dementia 13. This film was a very low budget, kind of small scale horror film, but for what it was, I think it was actually decent and not great or anything. I'm going to put it in the C tier still, but probably at the top. I think it's worth watching because seeing a director's first film is always interesting, especially when it's not horrible. And, he doesn't do horror too much. As I said, like Dracula was a horror film. this Dementia 13 is a horror film, and the next one is, but he doesn't really stick in the horror genre too much, so it's interesting every time he works in it to see something different that he comes up with. So Dementia 13 is worth a watch if you haven't seen it. Yeah, I would recommend it. Next we have Twixt, which is his most recently released film from back in 2011, so he hasn't made a movie since then. And this movie gets trashed a lot. It's on like a 4.3 or something on the IMDb. It's got a short run time, a small budget. It's a very bizarre kind of horror film. It's almost like a horror comedy. But to be honest, there's something I actually like about this film. I know that might sound weird. And look, I'm going to put it in the B tier. I actually like Twixt. I think it's a bad film, but it's a good bad film. Val Kilmer's in it, and he's just, yeah, not very good. Elle Fanning, I think her name is, she's in it. She's okay. And it's I don't know, it's not a good movie. It's not a film I'd really recommend to many people, but there's something about it that I just enjoy. And so I even have the Blu-ray, to be honest, like I'll tell you, but it's not a good movie, but I enjoy it. So I'm going to put it in the B tier. Next up we have probably his most hated film, and that's Jack. It's a bad movie. I'm going to put it in the D tier, but I'll put it at the top of the D tier. With Robin Williams in a comedy, a family comedy, but it's not really a family comedy. There's a lot of stuff that's probably inappropriate for kids in it. But the movie, it's not good. It's pretty bad. It's a little bit more entertaining than those other films in the D tier, but overall there's nothing going for it really at all. Next up we have The Godfather, the original film. So for me this is not as good as number 2, but it's definitely better than the third one, and it helps having Marlon Brando, who's a fantastic actor, in the lead, and Al Pacino as well. I'm not going to put this in the S tier, but it's definitely the A tier. Yeah, I know everyone would put this in the S tier, but I'm putting it in the A tier. It's very good. I think it's a little too long, a little bit boring in some places, but overall it's a fantastic film. It doesn't quite hit the highs, as I said, of the sequel, in my opinion, or Apocalypse Now or Dracula, but it is a very, very good film. And yeah, just for the time as well, this was like his 4th film, I think. And just to go from making these small independent budget films to this was pretty incredible. So that's The Godfather. And last but not least, we have The Cotton Club, which I think is a really solid movie. I'm going to put this high up in the B tier as well. I do like The Cotton Club. It's kind of another gangster film that he's done in the 80s era, though. And it's a bit more light and fun than the Godfather movies that are quite dark and heavy. And yeah, it was good. I actually watched it not long ago again. I have it on Blu-ray. And it's a solid film. It looks great. Got a good soundtrack, a good cast, and it's a very entertaining film as well. So yeah, that's my list, guys, of all Francis Ford Coppola's films. As you can see, he's very much in the B tier for me, with a few films above and a few below. But I'd recommend pretty much anything in the B tier and up. Yeah, he's got a new movie coming out that they filmed called Megalopolis, which is going to be out hopefully next year sometime. It's his first film in like 13 years. He's self-funded it. It's like got $1 million budget or something. So I really hope that it does well, and that he's able to keep working after that if he wants to. But it would just be good for him to like kind of release another big successful film again. So keep an eye out for that, as I definitely will be. And thank you for watching this video, guys. Please let me know your list below and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you later. Bye.